as like the main one.
And companion planting a great deal of it. And it is mixing your fruits and vegetables and herbs and flowers all in one landscape so that you're getting the most out of your yard that you possibly can. After all, this is your little piece of the earth, and this is a good place to put as much of it into it as you possibly can. So actual edible landscaping is the use of plants to produce food in a place that is more commonly used for ornamental plants. In other words, you want to mix everything together so that you've got all in one. I've got a book here that says all in one planting, that you can have it all. And then there's also some for landscaping with fruits as well. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And we'll go through the presentation. We'll see some things that you can mix with them. Now, this is the part usually when I have the audience in front of me, I'll ask you all, why do you actually want to garden? And so the answers are always usually, it's enjoyable, it's a calming, I love to get out. One man told me one time he loves to get out in the yard because nobody else is out there. And so he would go out. But anyway, why do we want to garden? So there's many different reasons, but no matter what we want to do, gardening is still work. And if you're like me, especially as I'm getting older, I want the most out of my work that I can possibly get. So therefore, this is what I would like to mix to do. In World War II, there was a call that went out across the world. It's very similar to what we're dealing with right now. And at that point in time, the soldiers needed food, they needed uniforms and everything. And so the companies all started manufacturing more and more things to help in the war effort. So at home, with so many of the men gone, the women and those that couldn't go to the war were there, and they were asked to put in gardens to start raising their own food because the farmers, so many of them had to leave, and the producing of food and everything was very difficult since the soldiers needed so much. So there was public gardens throughout the world. There was Central Park, New York, and Hyde Park in London, Golden Gate Bridge, everywhere. And we were raising over 40 to 60% of the food that was consumed in the world was being raised in home gardens. And that was during the war. My mom told me that she had one pair of shoes that got a hole in the bottom. She put cardboard in there, but they ate. They had a cow and they had a garden, and her grandfather lived with them. And so therefore they ate good during the time. Now we have something called freedom gardens. This is people that are gardening at home by choice to raise their own food, or part of it at least from that one. The movement started in about 2000. It started first with a family in California. They had 1/5 of an acre plus the house was on that. They decided that food was costing too much. And I will tell you that for the most part, when you get food in the grocery store, it has traveled 1,200 miles. So you know that it cannot be as fresh as being able to walk out your back door and pick a fresh tomato or what would be that you would like to have. So therefore, it's healthier to also have home gardenings and to mix this within your own landscape. The family of the Duvays, there was 5 of them, and they started turning one place at a time into the garden. They started first in the backyard. They worked around the side. They actually have gardens in the front yard. And this can be you can show that even though you've got vegetables and plants can be mixed in a beautiful landscape, pretty enough to be in the front yard on that one. So this is what they decided to do. Well, as time went by, they actually, in their subdivision, they were allowed to have chickens, and therefore they had a corner back there to raise chickens. We raise chickens, and I'll tell you right now, those eggs are just wonderful. And plus you get the fertilizer as well, and that's wonderful for your compost. So this is what they were doing. They raised enough food for their family. They had overproduced enough, and they started selling it to local restaurants and so forth. So they turned their home gardening in their home into something that for themselves that later became even an income situation. So now we have what we call the victory gardens of the 21st century, when we can now start turning our own landscapes into a garden that we can get food from, as well as enjoy the beautiful plants and things that we'll see there. The rewards of edible landscaping are health, economics, beauty, self-satisfaction, and joy, which is what we would have thought of a while ago when we were talking about why we want to garden. For our health, we know, and we see it in the articles all the time about different things. Food gets contaminated. We have an Ebola breakout. We have different things that happen. Not the caution, they take all kinds of cautions where the food is canned and fixed up, but a little something can happen. We find the preservatives and the dyes are in there. Ron was talking about not putting dyes into the bird feeders for the hummingbirds. They don't know for sure if it's affecting them or not, but it probably doesn't help. So dyes also, we do know that it has something to do with hypertension sometimes, and young children getting things that they shouldn't get, too much sugar and so forth. So what do we do so that we don't become one of these headlines? We can take pills, and we're not going to go against them because we need our medications on there. But by eating better, proper diets, and good and healthier food, we can probably take care of a lot of our own ailments that we have got. With the use of various different vegetables and herbs mixed and so forth, you can come up with some great dishes that will help to lower blood pressure, help lose weight, and all the various things. And of course, we fight diabetes, we fight the gluten situation and everything. So we do need our medications, and we'll never do without them, but we could do with less medications maybe if we choose to eat better and healthier, and as we go through life, actually. Children, Ron was showing his grandchild earlier on there. Children loved it to be outside. He said that he loved, his grandchild loved to go out in the backyard and see all the things that was going on in nature. Children are naturally curious about things. So if you've got grandchildren, your neighbor's children or whatever, they love to be, and get them outdoors. They need to get that vitamin C from that sunshine and be outside for that. And teach them more about where their food comes from. When my daughter was about 7 years old, she took a test in school that, and one of the questions on there was, where does ham come from? And to my disregard of what happened, she answered the grocery store, because I had not taken the time or even know to tell her that where different things came from that was on her plate. So that was a lesson to me that my children needed to know that their food didn't come just from the grocery store. It came from someplace else before the grocery store. There were farmers, there were people that were working to grow that food and where it came from. So get the children out there. When I was in the school system, we used to take beans and put them on a wet paper towel and put them in a plastic bag, stick them up on the bulletin board and watch them sprout. The children loved it. And we would plant that and they would take it home for Mother's Day or whatever. So get the children out and let them know what's going on in nature. One of the best things you can do and to grow is herbs. There is so many good reasons to add herbs into your yard. They, first of all, what are the herbs? They are a seed plant that has more or less tender stalks and stems that is used for making medicines and seasonings and potions and a lot of things. There is so much value to the use of herbs. And if we had been able to meet tonight, we would have had many dishes made of herbs that would have been delicious and you wouldn't even know it. One of the things that I love, well, Mike always made his tomato basil soup that he would make, but then we would have cookies, lavender cookies. I would love it. I had some cheese balls that were mixed with herbs that we would bring, and it was such a delightful thing to test all of this. We had rosemary tea and different things that we would have on this particular night. Maybe we'll be able to have a night, maybe Lori will have a night that we'll have one of our meetings and it'll be an herb night and you'll get to have some of those wonderful dishes. Herbs have been with us throughout history. They go clear back to the biblical times. We've always had them mentioned. Most of the plants mentioned in the Bible are herbs, and they were here. That was part of the creation of the world. Animals instinctively, when they're out in the yard and so forth, you can watch. They'll know exactly what grasses and so forth are safe to eat for the most part. the Middle East was known as the cradle of civilization, and it was a great deal of where you would find a lot of the herbs. The Chinese, they, for 5,000 years, have known about the value of herbs. They were the first pharmaceutical people in the country. Ginkgo and ginseng is one of their mainstays. I have a friend that lives almost off the grid. Basically, he lives pretty far out, and natural woods around him all the time. And he often goes out and finds ginseng, and he brings it in and he sells it. And sometimes the natural ginseng growing in the wild can go for $200 to $600 a pound. It is very valuable, and the Oriental people absolutely use it so much in so many things that they do. In the 1500s, there was a man called Rupert Dodoleans, and he went out and he decided to search more about nature. And so in 1554, he produced a book that was 715 hand-drawn images of plants. And he studied them very carefully for their uses and so forth. Most of all of that was herb plants. And in 1583, that particular book was sold second only to the Bible throughout the world. And then we go to our medieval medical inheritance. We have Egypt and Greece and Rome. There was a drug that was used. We had the gladiators and we had the wars, and they didn't have our modern painkillers as such, but there was a plant called the mandrake. And from that, they would get an opium type of ingredient that they could give to the soldiers and the warriors as such, because of their wounded war injuries or what would be in there. So they were even using the herbs. And of course, you see the symbols there of the leaves and so in the carvings. And then we come to America. And who knew the most about what was going on in nature but our Native American Indians, who were here when the first pioneers and everybody came across. And a few years back, there was a show on television called Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. And in part of that, she had her medical training, but when she went out west, she discovered by talking with the Indians, there was so much to learn from nature and so much to learn from plants. We have a doctor among us, Dr. Jarrett, and he's a heart doctor. And a few years ago, he gave a presentation about how much of your medicines come from nature. We look to nature for the cure of so many of our diseases and for other things that we do. And those plants are usually all in the herb classification. Herbs are classified into 5 distinctive categories: aromatic, culinary, medicinal, ornamental, and predator management. For the aromatic herbs, these are the ones that have the scents on that one. Now, some of us are a little bit more sensitive to that. I have to be careful. There's a lot of things, perfumes and things like that. I can't be around. I'm just, they come from some of the plants and so forth that I just can't be around. So I have to be careful about that. But then you go to mint and spearmint and things like that. Those are great for opening up the sinuses. And right now, this type of weather, opening up everything to breathe better. And these are used in the vaporizers and things like that. So they're very good to have on that one. But there are some that are a problem with the smelling and so forth on there. So the chemicals that people are making, they put some of those in it to make it that much more pleasant. You probably wouldn't want to smell some of the chemicals. Your soap detergents and things like that have got the chemicals in it. They're aromatic herbs. They're also good for bath salts and the aromatic salts and things that are put into baths that's calming and keeps the anxieties down for that. Some of the ones to grow in your own yard that are easy to grow are basil, lavender, lemon balm, various mints, and scented geraniums. These are easy to grow, and the smell is wonderful in the landscape. And they also are great for attracting the pollinators, which Ron was talking about earlier. Then we come to the culinary herbs, and some of us are very familiar with those. Those are the ones that enhance the taste of our foods. You can fix certain vegetables 10 different varieties, but just adding various combinations of herbs. We would have tested those tonight on that one. They're used for so many things. There's some herbs that are great for their antitoxins. They're good for ingesting for that. They are good for the spices that we would need that make things so much better. And after all, remember, many years ago, an old colonel from Kentucky put 21 spices and herbs together and created the chicken that we all love to eat in the Kentucky Fried Chicken. Some of our popular herbs, also easy to grow, are basil, chives, cilantro, dill, or oregano, sage, and rosemary. The only thing that I have in my yard right now that hasn't ground this year and so forth, I do happen to have some chives right here. A while ago, my cat was after them. I had to shush him away for that one. I also have some parsley growing here to show you how easy it is to grow. It's growing in a boot back at the top, sitting outside in the yard. So herbs are really easy to grow and the benefits are fantastic. Edible flowers. This is something else that you can have. There is a lot of flowers. You can go and actually buy bags of flowers at the grocery store, the fresh market and places like that. We'll have that. In the finer restaurants all over New York and around the world, the haute cuisine and so forth, they decorate with the live flowers that you can see here that are edible flowers to grow. The one at the bottom, that is squash blossom. A lot of people that grow big enough, they'll stuff them and they fry them in the fry pan. We have one of our master gardeners who has quite a bit of knowledge about the edible flowers, and I was really going to try to have her part of our discussion tonight if things have been a little bit different. But then we find some that the decorators use. They dip them in a mixture of sugar and coat them, and then they're used for decorating. So roses and a lot of other plants are edible. And then we come to our medicinal herbs. You'll notice the last 10 to 15 years, it's become very much important that when you go to the doctor's office, they have you fill out all your medicines, of course, but they also start asking, what are you buying? What are your supplements that you're getting over the counter? So what are you adding? And the reason they're doing that is because, as we said before, your medicines are coming so much from the herbs in nature. And sorry about that. I thought my phone was on vibrate, was supposed to be. Okay, on that one. So the medicines are coming from a lot of our plants, and therefore your doctor needs to know exactly what ones you are taking so as not to mix anything. I have arthritis a great deal in my hands. I have been on a drug called Mobic, or Meloxicam, as you may know it, for quite a while. And a lot of that comes from Teramac. Teramac, I'll say it right. I'll get to say it right on that one. And but I can take an extra, a couple of pills of that. I checked with my doctor and it is okay to do that. And so I have added that also to help the inflammation from my hands a great deal. So, and it does work. It really does. But then we have our ornamental. This is the fun stuff. This is where we just mix them up. We make soaps out of them. We make wreaths out. That's bay leaves down there. We make potpourri. We make eye bags to take on swelling for things like that. Beautiful plants can be dried and made and framed and put up. This particular one up here at the top that you see here, that's called a tussie mussy. And many years in the Victorian era, special, the flowers have a language. Certain flowers, roses, of course, always mean love. Some flowers, they mean caring and endearment. Some mean I don't like you. They have a language of their own. And so a bride would often carry this, and she would mix the certain flowers in this little bouquet, and her groom would know then the message that she was sending very silently to him as they stood at the altar making their marriage vows. And it was called a tussie mussy. And so these things are there. We have two people that we can recommend to you to get your herbs from. One you probably had a class from already this year, and that is from Pat Stewart, Down to Earth. And then we have another lady, Ivana Patterson, who has Lavender and Rust, which is a farm in Rock Springs. And you can get your lavender and basil, her special ones there. But Pat, especially, Ivana does a lot of cooking with herbs and ointments, but Pat also makes a lot of soaps and different things that she makes that she sells. So those people, if you're interested in any of those things, be sure that you try to contact from them, because everything they have will be top notch. Then we come to predator management. This is, even if you don't want to eat the herbs, you don't want to use them, as if you want to attract more of the good beneficials to your yard and detract the things that you don't want, as Ron was talking about earlier, then this is a good reason to grow the herbs and mix them throughout the yard. Sometimes we feel this is exactly what's happening. We plant and then invaded with the aphids or something else, the white flies, whatever comes along. We feel like we're constantly at a battle. And it's so easy to go ahead and jump for the killers. But when we use those, we're also killing away our beneficials and our insects. We're putting our birds, our wildlife in danger by using those, washing into the water stems and so forth. Very much of what Ron just talked to you about. So therefore, we would tell you that we don't want to use those if at all possible. Herbs is a good alternative to that. You're making a natural ecosystem within your own yard that will take care of a lot of that. Sure, if you get an invasion of something, we may have to go to that, but it's the last resort. And even when I do have to do that, I try to use saving dust or something that'll be there for just a little while, and then then it can dissipate real quickly with the rain and so forth, and try not to let it wash away, of course, into that. But that's the one I try to use. Is try to use anything more powerful than that as least as possible. Herbs can handle that for you. We have a lot of wonderful herbs that we can grow that will do exactly what we're talking about here. We can bring in our the ones that we have here. We can bring in our rosemary. We can bring in our bee balm that we have. Well, the rosemary and the Western sage, got them backwards there on that one. The yarwa, which comes in 2 or 3 different colors, by the way, pink, yellow, and white. And then you get your lavender. And the beauty part about this, if you live where the deer is, deer don't like them. So that's also an extra bonus there, that the deer doesn't like to go around those. Any of these are wonderful to grow. They bring in the good, the bees and the butterflies and so forth, and they'll also, because some of them are scented, helps to keep away those that are bad things. And again, it takes away from the deer. Some attractors that will come to your herbs, and that will be to have plants that will attract your hummingbirds and your good bugs and so forth are your yarwa, the purple coneflower, the lavender, Joe Pye weed, anise hyssop, and the bee balm. I will tell you that Joe Pye weed gets very, very tall and needs to be in a very damp place, but there is Little Joe, and Little Joe doesn't get as tall, and so therefore it might be a more practical plant. That's the one that you'll see rolling down the highways, and you'll see the ditches and so forth, and you'll see this big tall plant with this great big huge plume of clustered of flowers on the top, and that's Joe Pye weed. The coneflower, of course, is the Tennessee flower, and it's very good. It's echinacea. That's one we get a great deal of our immune disorder pills from, and to help to build up your immune system comes from the coneflower. The bee balm is terrific on that one, and the fascinating thing is it has a square stem, and it's just so neat to me. I just love it. Then we talk more about the edible landscaping is also economical. We can grow our own and put money in the bank or go to the grocery store and spend it back out. For one tomato can be almost a pound, and look what you would pay. But a tomato plant can give you 10 or 15 or more tomatoes. One little seed can make a plant that can give you that many more tomatoes, and you walk right out your back door to the garden and pick it right off the vine. You cannot get any fresher than that, as well as your squash and a lot of other wonderful plants that you can grow and have out there. I grew iceberg. I love the iceberg lettuce. I know it doesn't have as many nutrients as some of the others, but there was one called salad bow. One time I grew it because it was real crisp. I like lettuce to be crisp. And it was so interesting. You fix your hamburgers and walk out in the yard, pick up the lettuce, bring it in, put it on the hamburger. Wash it first, but bring it in. It was just really neat and quite enjoyable as well. Now the choices are a packet of seeds, flower seeds, vegetable seeds, that cost about the same amount of money. You're going to get a beautiful bouquet, beautiful flowers. You're going to get flowers also on the squash plants. But at the end of that, this is what you've got, just a lot of dead flowers and nothing else. But when you have that, when the flower fades away, here comes the fruit. So make the choice. Which would you rather have in the yard to grow? Gardening is not complicated. It's very sensible, actually, and that was a movie a few years ago on that one. Also, then we have beauty. A landscape design includes trees, shrubs, flowers, textures, and our hardscape as well. For our trees, these are in bloom. Everybody loves them, but there's a problem. They really do not smell good. They are very invasive because they are actually a hybrid. They are not natural. They're not sturdy trees. So instead, think about the fruit trees that you can use. How about apples and peaches and pears and plums, all in the yard. You're going to get the beautiful flowers that you're wanting. And then in the summer, you're going to get the shade that you covet from a tree. But in the fall, you've got the fruit. And that's to go to pick it right off. Can it up for the winter, have it enjoyable all winter long. And besides, on this one, I have a former neighbor not too far away. And every 5 years, he pays people to come and cut these trees down to the stalks and let them come back out again just so they won't break out. I don't want to plant any tree in my yard that I've got to pay somebody every 5 years to come and do all its pruning and taking care of it so that I don't lose it. So I'm much more into having the fruit trees for me. Then we've got our shrubs that we can have. So why not choose an edible shrub? How about this one? It's going to be in the springtime. I've got beautiful little blooms. In the summertime, I've got berries. Excuse my cat. And then in the fall, I've got this beautiful, beautiful bush that turns a beautiful fall red. And all winter long, this is what I'm going to enjoy. So there's the antitoxins and everything, the blueberries. We're going to have a gentleman at the expo that's right down here in Ringgold, Georgia. And we'll put a note out later that he will have a U-pick. And he said the blueberries are already starting to bloom out. And we're hoping not to get a late freeze on there. But the value of blueberries is unbelievable as far as your health is concerned. It's one of the best things you can possibly eat and grow. The secret to that, of course, you have to have a male and you have to have two different varieties for that one, for them to pollinate. And they do have to have a low acid soil. So that's another thing you want to think about. Now we've got our flowers, the beautiful flowers that will attract more of your beneficials to the yard. Again, this is what the Joe Pye weed looks like. This is the yellow yarrow. This is Miller Rose, the bee balm, and then the lavender. Again, beautiful plants, and yet they're so beneficial to have them in your edible landscape. Ground covers. Don't forget how good the ground covers can be. This is thyme. Thyme comes in this beautiful rose color. It comes in yellow and it comes in white. And the ground cover is just wonderful. It's a steppable plant. You can actually walk through it. It will and not harm it. Go out there and pick it as part of added to your food. Over here, you can trellis your peas and plants up there. And then along the edge is a border plant strawberries. They'll send out their runners. They'll cover the ground. They keep the roots cool for your other plants, make the ground cover, and then also they're going to produce so many berries, ever bearing as ones to grow, and you'll get strawberries then all throughout the summer part. on that one. Mint, oh my goodness, mint comes in so many different varieties, and it's so good to have in tea and coffee and cooking. Just so many. I think there's probably 10 different mints. There's even a chocolate mint, and they actually taste a lot like that. And spearmint, and just so many of them. This is rosemary over here. Rosemary will actually make a bush. Leave it alone, give it a good growing place, and it can fill on a landscape, on a hillside, or wherever. It can actually make a privacy for you. And there is nothing better than putting a sprig of rosemary in something. I do a lot of canning, and I do peaches, and put some rosemary into some peaches. I mean, that is to die for as far as a jam, peach jam would be. So think about using this for the ground covers and so forth. Stay away from some of the other plants that don't have as much beneficials to you. Now then, there's a thing, it's just textures. You don't really have to have a bloom to have a beautiful landscape. Just mixing the light greens, lines, dark greens, chartreuse, and mix them in then with your purples and the different colors is just absolutely wonderful. In this particular combination right here, we've got purple basil, we've got parsley, there's sage, there's cilantro, there's thyme around the bottoms, yarrow, there's dill, there's fennel, and I believe there's even some lemon, some sage leaves in here. All of that is in one area, and it's a beautiful texture. My side yard at my former house was kind of a shade garden and so forth, was there, and I didn't have anything that bloomed. I had a combination of hostas and columbine and ferns. Ferns come in so many, from almost white leaves clear to dark. I had coral bells and everything. It was simply a textured garden, and it was just gorgeous. It was just really, really pretty. And except for those little spiky things that hostas send up on there, nothing else really, I'm not hostas, but you got hostas and coral bells send up those little spiky flowers. But I think they really didn't bloom. It was just pretty into textures, and herbs can give you that texture along with a lot mixing with your vegetables. Now we talk about our hardscape, and that is very important. Ron was showing he's on his Carolina jasmine on. Things will also grow on fences. Down here we have peas. Now you start them early because they like it cool. But if you got some fencing, just grow the peas on it. Go out there and pick your peas on that one. Provides also, when you grow things on your fencing, you're giving yourself privacy. And depending on the subdivisions and what the requirements are, as to help you have more privacy in your yard, then be able to grow things on your fence. You have raspberries over here. I had one raspberry plant last year, and I could not believe how many limbs like it. So it put out, it went down the fence, and it was right in front of my chicken yard, and I had netting over to keep the chickens from flying out and so forth. It went over into the netting. It got so thick it almost provided a shaded area for my chickens on that one. And besides, we could eat. Of course, the chickens love the raspberries too. I would feed them that. Roses are wonderful. Remember, they're edible. And grow them on your trellises and so forth. Obviously, everybody loves roses, and you've just had a class from the Jarretts, who are the experts with all of our roses. And this is a wonderful thing to add. The grapes and hyacinth beans and just a lot of the things that will trail, let them grow up, make a cover for your patio or whatever, and they'll let the fruit just hang down. It makes it a lot easier to pick that way if you trellis it up, but give it for shade. And then you've got your, you can use your thyme in between the bricks. You can make the walkway. But here we have got all the plants. We've got rosemary, and we've got lavender. We've got sage and so much here. And this makes it just a beautiful pathway to walk. And then as Stephanie has already told you, she's already spoken, to tell you that you always have a focal point. Have your path go someplace. Put a bench at the end. As Ron said, sit there and enjoy what you've been doing on that one. Enjoy it. Children, trellis up the beans. Make a teepee out in the yard. There's nothing better, little place for children to go play inside. And then puts the beans up there. I did Kentucky Wonders, and they are wonderful. They grow high. I mixed it with, I planted borage around the bottom of it, and they were so much more prolific. That's borage is a good companion for beans. And so it made such a nice little area out in the yard. I had mine on bamboo poles. I don't have little children, so I didn't make the teepee, but I did trellis them up on the bamboo poles. And it was really a nice place to look. It made a shelter, and I grew the rhubarb behind it because rhubarb can't take a hot summer. So I put my rhubarb was behind the shelter of the beans that were trellised up. Now for just plain old good joy and satisfaction, don't forget to enjoy what you've done. You've worked at it, you've planted, and now sit back, sit on your porch, Ron said, sit out in the yard and just sit there and enjoy it. Look at all of what nature has. The abundance of what you have put in your yard is buckets worth, and it looks so pretty next to the flowers. When you mix the flowers, you put trellis, the beans, the strawberries around the edge, the parsley, the bee balm, and everything mixes together. Nature is made to grow together, and your yard will give back to you what you need. You're paying taxes, you may be paying a mortgage on it and everything. Let it pay back, give itself back to you and enjoy it as much as you possibly can. And then we come to the questions, which will be chat. We'll be really running close on time on that one. But on this particular slide that you can see here, you can see how attractive you can make your yard, and mixing your fruits, your vegetables, your herbs, and all of it together with the flowers and all of it to nature. And it all goes together beautifully. On the steps, you can grow the sage and the rosemary and cilantro and all of those right up, going up the walks, the steps there. Plant the lavender and things going into the doorway. When your guests come, let them enjoy the beautiful fragrances as they come to your door. You could use raised beds, which is what we recommend so much for this area, because for many different reasons. You can make it attractive in between. Mike will talk to you about, has already talked to you about the turf grass and what you can grow in between that to make it attractive on there. Down the driveway, maybe your driveway is next to your neighbors, and so there's a little bit of area there. Raise it up a little bit and plant some things, share it with the neighbor, and both of you can grow some things right in the middle of the yard. That's where the sun is. My sister, if she grows vegetables and herbs, she has to grow them in her yard, in the front yard actually, because her backyard is shaded pretty much, and it also backs up to a natural preserve. So anything that she has to grow that needs sun does come to her front yard, and she's got some gardens there. She mixes it with her hardscape, and it's very attractive right out there in the front yard. And again, this is be an herb knot. You can make it one place as a garden right there to enjoy. And then this is a look from what Wisdom was at one time. My actually yard, we have since moved. And this was growing, looking right down there to where my vegetables gardens was right as I came out my back door. So this is a beautiful way to mix it. You can have it all by putting it all together. And that is all I have for you. And if there are questions and there is time, I'll give it back to Tom, and he can do the rest of it.
Okay, thank you, Carol. That was a very good overview. Does anybody, I think we had a couple of chats in there. Liam, do you want to mention any of the chats that came up?
I mean, I'm fine with any of them.
Yeah, there was.
I don't see them on my screen, so.
Yeah, we'll bring them up. If not, is anybody?
There was a couple questions. One was about whether it's possible to grow turmeric, and Ron chimed in that you could grow ginger or turmeric in pots. Because I guess in the winter it would be too cold for them to be outdoors.